Hey, it's another episode of Low Bit Rate. My name is Hank.
I'm Maggie.
We have 5 new releases. We have not talked about these at all with each other. Let's go. David Berman is back. He disbanded the Silver Jews 12 years ago because his dad is very bad. And he's back with a bit of an ensemble cast. We got a whole bunch of members in Purple Mountains from all sorts of bands. Let's see if they made something good. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, this is good.
I really liked it. This kind of malaised, blasé take on Americana with those monotone diatribes about how postmodern and shitty everything is. I just
insanely melodramatic lyrical matter that's sung like he doesn't even give a shit.
He doesn't give a fuck.
Like so disaffected.
I love it. I love how melodramatic it is. I love these kind of deep excursions into the soul of David Berman. I don't know what it is that makes me such a sucker for these like aging indie star sort of comeback albums where they kind of reflect on their career and all the friends and enemies they've made along the way. But this fires on a lot of the same cylinders that like Sun Kil Moon does for me. I just love, I don't know, there's something about like the hot-headed indie guy kind of reflecting on how hot-headed he's been throughout the years that makes for really compelling songwriting for me. And I just love, particularly the standout track here for me is Margarita.
I knew it. That song's so good.
Because
I was going to say that one's mine too.
It's just the perfect...
That one rips. I think the subject matter is sort of tackling like the God has left us, like a classical literature thematic there in this like really lazy kind of drony way is really exciting, and he even throws a nice little pop chorus in there for you to munch on.
What he's essentially getting at with Margaritas at the Mall and songs like that is kind of the Trumpian landscape, you know, but yeah. He's never so...
Storyline fever too.
Yeah, totally, but he's never so crass as to you know, directly address these figures by name, you know? He's just very...
Or even implicitly, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
If you, like, even put an ear at all to the actual lyrics of the song, you're gonna understand that. He doesn't need to like bring up Kalfefe or whatever to get you to get the picture.
Yeah, totally. He's always been very good at sort of painting in broad strokes, like whatever, you know, political or contemporary landscape he's writing in at the time. That's what makes American Water such a good album.
Yeah, I really appreciate how like personal and how much of a deep stab into his life a lot of these tracks are. Because for me, any of this sort of like basic and like drab instrumentation really works if you're speaking about topics that juxtapose with that kind of simplicity. And I think he does a good job of doing that and making the words kind of pop out a little more than if he just was talking a little more generally.
Kind of, you know, a bard of his times.
For real.
It's really marvelous to have him back and making music again. I suppose I understand philosophically his kind of motivation for stepping away from music, given how, you know, terrible of a person his father is, and, you know, I understand being the son of a rich lobbyist maybe doesn't make you feel so great about having a career entirely based on art. But I think he's too vital to not have around.
Yeah, I did give this a 7, so I should mention where I took a few points off. It's mainly on some of the more like slower, almost verging on soft rock songs. I just don't think his voice is very well suited for that. Like I can hear the like drawl and rasp like right under the surface, like trying to come out, but it just sounds like he's singing with way too much restraint for me to really get into songs like I Love to Be My Mother's Son, or Snow is Falling in Manhattan. I just want to hear him like kind of let the sing-song nature of his lyrics come out a little bit more.
Sure. I mean, I can definitely respect that. I've always thought his moments of bombast were more kind of affecting than, you know, some of the lighter moments.
Yeah.
But that said, this is still, I think, a really great entry point into what is otherwise a pretty rich discography. I think if you're at all interested in this sort of Americana-drenched, melancholic sort of reflections on the self, you will have a really good time with the rest of the David Berman catalog.
It's a good one.
Kokoko are a 6-piece sort of punk, sort of electronic, sort of house group from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They make some really interesting sounds with pretty minimal and sparse instrumentation. Let's get right into chatting about it. 3, 2, 1, here we go. That's what I thought.
That's so low.
Yeah.
This shit rips.
It rips. To a point. It does rip. But I just needed about 8 to 10 minutes of this thing shaved off.
I agree. It could have lost a couple tracks for sure. But it's still only like 45 minutes-ish, so it's not, at least for me, it didn't drag so much that it made me think less of the album.
I think generally, my biggest problem with this album was that I feel like it was really front-loaded. I feel like all of their best and most exciting ideas kind of came within the first 5 or 6 tracks. Because what they do offer here is really interesting and really exciting. The instrumentation feels kind of like really, it is objectively minimal, but it doesn't ever feel
It's
super
so
minimal.
thick. The production is so dope. I love how often the bass track is literally just some like drone. It's just like for like 4 minutes.
And like the synth bass is really great. I love how effectively they utilize like 808 style claps. I think I have never liked hard pan guitars, but I think they work really well here.
Especially for how like metallic and like sharp and angular they are. The number one thing that I was blown away with when I heard this was how like angry and passionate and like rambunctious these tracks were. They just like, when I was reading about the album, everyone was talking about it like it's this party album, like this driving around town with your bros kind of vibing out type of album, you know? But from the very first track, you can hear how like serious and like strong-willed the vocals on these are. That one guy with the really like thick baritone voice, he has like a feature track on Malimbe, which just blows me away every time I hear it. You can just hear how strong that guy's voice is. And they don't overuse him either, so every time he comes in, it's just like knocking on your ass. It's awesome. Yeah,
and I really, I don't know, it was so full of like really propulsive head nodders. Like every, I mean, they capture the circumstances under which they met, which was at street parties, really well. It has that kind of frenzied, kind of atmosphere to it that I think translates extremely well. The problem for me was towards the end of the album, it kind of takes a shift towards the contemplative a little bit, in a way that I don't think necessarily worked for me because I was so invested in the dancier kind of, more rhythmically sound moments. Yeah, for me, what carried the back end is mostly the guitar work. I think on tracks like a Tongos, I guess is how you say it, and Love, the guitar lead in those 2 tracks and several others in the back end is just like blistering and just slamming in your brain, and it just like is such an earworm even when they drop the 4-on-4 beat underneath it all. This was definitely verging on a 7 for me. There really was a lot to love about this. I would love to see them do some collaborations with some other artists. I think they could really kind of become like almost like a standing on the corner-esque, like kind of muse for some other artists as well. I think they have a lot of really exciting things ahead of them that I'm really excited to check out. Drab Majesty is the project of Deb Demure, which is the pseudonym of Andrew Klinko, who you may know from Black Mare. This started as a side project, but it's kind of taken on a life of its own and almost eclipsed any other work that the artist has been involved with. So let's see if it stacks up. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. I feel bad because on paper, this is everything that I wanted an album that we reviewed a couple weeks ago, Clay Rendering's California Black Vows, to be. It has better production, the vocals are better, the songwriting generally is more interesting, atmospherically it's nice, and yet, I still just kind of like don't give a fuck.
Yeah, this album is Greta Van Fleet for The Cure. That's what it sounds like.
Holy fuck, dude! Oh my god!
It is like 40 minutes of echo vocals and reverb guitars, and there's a couple tracks I can pick out where there's a bit more of a penchant for melody, like The Other Side and Oxytocin, that I actually really enjoyed, and I wish that the project went more in that direction and just kind of let it rip with the catchy hooks. But any of this stuff that just relies on atmosphere to get the job done, it just sounds so derivative to me, and I just can't get in the right headspace to enjoy it.
Yeah, this whole time I was like, fuck, I could be listening to like Soft Cell or like anybody else, you know? Because like it is just, I mean, it verges on rote and like formulaic, you know? Every song is just and then like yeah, and like I don't know, man, I just don't care about that at this point. Like Chromatics did it better. Fucking every 80s synth pop band did it better, you know? I just I like the idea, and I like, and again, I don't, in theory, hate the idea of like goth revivalism. I think it's a genre and an attitude that you know it's ripe for reinvention. But this doesn't even attempt to really do that. It just kind of captures like the same kind of dreary, dreamy, synthy moods that we've been hearing for the last 30 fucking years.
Exactly.
And I guess I just don't, there's nothing for me, like I'm never, I don't know, every time I put this on, it was just like, yep, I can't distinguish any of these tracks.
100, totally. I almost wish there was something for me to hate on this.
Yeah.
Because it's so, I can't even pick out anything in particular for me to rag on. It's just such a wash of sound to me that completely just goes right by me every time I put on the album.
And I gave it a 6 because it's pleasant.
Yeah,
certainly.
That's why I
know,
didn't give it a negative score, because there's nothing in here that makes me want to shut the album off. It's just like background noise.
It's competently executed.
Absolutely.
And you know, not particularly grating to listen to. But its only success is that it is not that. I mean, check it out if you want this for some reason.
If I walked into a bar and they were just playing this, I would probably think that was pretty dope.
Yeah, that'd be a cool bar.
It's like a good bar album to like have a couple brews and sit at a big smelly table with your friends.
Yeah.
I'd be pretty into that kind of thing. But in terms of just like listening on my own, it doesn't stick with me.
The coolest boutique clothing store in the world would play this album.
Yeah. I think the project has some potential if they move a little further away from the revivalism type of sound. But for now, it just wasn't for me.
Wreck and Reference are a two-piece experimental music duo from California. They have put out a couple of really well-received albums on the record label The Flenser, which is sort of known for its post-metal output. On this album, they're working with a lot of electronic textures and things of that nature, so let's see if those experiments were successful. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. I knew it was going to happen, but it still hurts.
I just want more of What Is a Gift. Because that song rips, and the rest of this just really falls into the same, like, kind of twinkling around textural noise stuff with a disaffected voice on top of it that I've heard a billion times. It's certainly not bad, and it's like a little ear massage almost. It puts me in a good mood. And there's a few points here and there where I like some interplay between the vocals and the electronic stuff. But by and large, I've heard other bands do this better, and I just am not that interested in this kind of vocal style anymore.
You're a fool and a dickhead, and here's why. Wreck and Reference are a band that are, for whatever reason, very near and dear to me. I encountered their first, or their second full-length album, Want, in 2014, I think, back when I was writing for a music review blog in high school. They're one of the only bands that I have gotten a tattoo of. I really have some sort of deep connection with this band, and Absolute Still Life for me is a really solid continuation of some of the ideas that they've been playing with kind of all throughout their lineage. Their initial work, the Black Cassette, which was a 5-track EP, all the way up to Want, and then the 2016's Indifferent Rivers Romance End. They're all sort of playing with the vocabulary of metal, but it growing increasingly distant from it with every single subsequent release. And on this album, they've almost entirely abandoned it, except on the track that you pointed out, which is, I'm sure...
Which is a ripper. I love that track.
And if you like that, there's a whole back catalog of previous work that sounds pretty much exactly like that. And what is so interesting about Rec and Reference compositionally, I don't know how much you looked into the band prior to this, but they compose, from what I understand, primarily in Ableton. And so on stage, when they're doing, what they're doing is they have a live drum set and then they cue samples off like a sample pad. And to see that applied to metal was really cool, but to almost see them kind of really embrace the electronic elements of what they're working with here and include some of those like kind of sputtering like vocal stabs and some synths. There's some like trap hi-hats here that I really that I really like. The whole thing is bleary, and yes, it's monotone, and yes, there's lots of tinkering and sound collage type stuff. But I still think that lyrically, they're far and away one of the best bands making this kind of music. And I still can't help but be really enamored with just what they're doing texturally here. I think they really succeed very well at creating a genuine air of like despair and melancholy in a way that other bands just can't pull off.
Sure, and that's why I gave this a positive score, because I think obviously they're masters at texture and atmosphere and just the general vibe that an album can put you in. And it's interesting that you brought up lyrics, because for me, that's one of the biggest reasons that I took this down a couple notes in conjunction with the vocal style. The reason that this kind of like dissociated, like drab, emotionless, kind of like half spoken word vocal style works for an artist like Shoo Shoo as opposed to on this record is because the lyrical matter is more straightforward and easily digestible. So I think the juxtaposition of talking so simply and plainly about really intense and like vulgar topics is the appeal of that kind of lyrical delivery. But with these more like bloated kind of abstract lyrics, it just comes off more like a poetry reading with some bleeps and bloops underneath it.
Which I guess is honestly at this point I'm fine with.
Yeah.
It's like having two industrial dudes like beat you over the head and read Ezra Pound to you, and like I don't mind it.
Yeah, full disclosure, this is a very personal score because I think if you like the kind of shit that I'm bringing up here, you'll probably like this album because functionally and technically, it's very well put together. And for what it's trying to accomplish, it does so really well.
And if you like the idea of a much more abrasive take on this style, all of their previous albums have that in spades. So absolutely worth checking out. I guess, again, this kind of seems to be a recurring theme on the show where one of us has a long-standing relationship with the band and the other person just doesn't fucking get it. But I still think that while this may not be the best entry point into their discography, I still think they're playing with a lot of really interesting ideas, and it has me very excited to see what new horizons they'll be approaching next. Caligula is the latest from Lingua Ignota, the project of Kristen Hayter. It is I hate to use this term, but neoclassical dark wave noise project that deals in themes of religious fervor and domestic abuse, which are a little bit more intrinsically linked than you may believe. Let's see what we thought of this one. 3, 2, 1. Man, we're right on it today.
Pretty much. This album has one of the best vocal performances of the whole year.
Ever.
It just
Even.
for real, it knocked me on my ass how amazingly well performed this album was.
The transitions between a hater's gorgeous, operatic vocals into those just throat-shredding fucking screams is just majestic.
Before you get too worried, there's no kind of show-offy kind of shit in here either. It always feels very necessary and intentional, and it furthers the lyrical themes really nicely.
We're dealing in medieval modes, and it truly is. I hate the fucking term neoclassical dark wave because what a made up fucking genre descriptor. But that said, this absolutely traffics much more closely with classical music than it does any contemporary anything of this nature. And which is fair because the fucking name Lingua Ignota is a reference to the language of Hildegard of Bingen. So we're really dealing with some heavy, really intensely medieval and post-medieval religious themes here, compositionally, lyrically, atmospherically. This is a really heavy album.
Yeah.
In all senses of
every
the word.
respect, yeah.
How many times have we heard, black metal guys invoke Satan, things like that? And how many times have you genuinely felt anything because of that?
Yeah.
But when Christian Hater says, get beside me, Satan, in the second track, Do You Doubt Me, Traitor, you believe it.
How personal and earnest the delivery is what makes what on its face, if you just sat and read a lyric sheet, most of these lyrics are so melodramatic and so on the nose, but because of how intensely earnest and clearly attached to the artist the delivery is, it's hard to call them hokey.
She elevates every single line to the heights of Greek tragedy.
Yeah, for real.
This album is more than most other noise albums that I have heard this year can be described as artistic. And you can't really talk about this album without talking about some of the collaborators that she has here. We have appearances from members of The Body, Uniform, Full of Hell, The Rita doing some fucking pummeling harsh noise wall type stuff here.
Yeah.
It's a murderer's row of harsh music performers, and yet it's still so clearly Hater's singular vision. You can't. It feels like one of those albums where somebody's singular vision came into fruition because they have a lot of really talented friends who are willing to go along with the idea behind the project. And I love how out of time some of these really brutal depictions of abuse are. It's this could be taking place in the 1600s just as much as it could be taking place in a contemporary setting. And I think that's the point. I think it manages to. In a way, this album almost charts the entire chronology of violence against women into one super impassioned religious frenzy.
I think what you said, especially about sort of being a chronicle of domestic abuse across all timelines, is especially poignant in thinking about how unfiltered and to the point this is. There's very little metaphor or literary techniques to bog down the central emotive themes.
Yeah, she's channeling the rage of millennia of women, and I feel very blessed to be living in a time where we have artists who are making compelling work like this, because so often it's so easy to fall into the trap of making a noise album about some controversial subject or another, or to attempt to confront societal ills that haven't come across as really hokey and, all of those things. But this album understands pain and redemption and revenge and brutality in such an intrinsic and borderline animalistic way.
This proves that if you've experienced the subject matter that you're going for, you don't need to make up some kind of like lens or overarching theme to address it. Just be yourself and just hit it with what comes naturally to you, and the emotion's going to come across in the music.
I am so pleased to have been able to listen to such an honest and ferocious album. This is easily one of my albums of the year. I can only see myself enjoying it more the more that I listen to it.
The main thing that drug the score down for me is I really think it's the vocal performance that holds this together. I think most of the instrumental scores are nice and serve as a good background as a juxtaposition to the more like screamy, operatic, performative vocals, but I've heard this marriage of like noise and classical music so much that there's only so many times where I can really get excited about like a sparse string section and then a big climax and a big crescendo and screamy vocals and then back to some, little plinky pianos. I don't know, in my opinion, I think if Kristen like met up with somebody whose primary focus is like contemporary composition or something like that and crank something out that really focuses on interplay between the sonic quality of the vocals and the sonic quality of the instrumentals, I would be all over that, because that's basically the only thing that keeps this from really climbing up my year-end list.
I will say, while I have heard those elements used before, I think Caligula displays a whole lot more compositional intentionality than a lot of those other projects do, where it's just very easy to sample some classical music and then scream atop it.
Yeah.
But here, we're really dealing with actual like modern classical composition. Although I will say that you bringing up the idea of Kristen Hayter collaborating with like a modern classical composer is like probably one of the best ideas ever.
It'd be so dope.
I think. I mean, she could go anywhere at this point, but what is so exciting for me is the response to this album and seeing that wider audiences can be really interested in genuinely like full bore abrasive music. This isn't like a noise album that's making compromises or attempting to appeal to melody or anything like that. This is full on challenging, brutal, uncompromising music that's just, in my opinion, essential listening.
All right, before we go, we're going to hit you with a couple quick recs. This is some media that we've been checking out recently, and you should check it out too. We've been doing a lot of black metal on this show recently, and it got me thinking about other modern black metal bands that I've really enjoyed. Probably one of the biggest is this band Dumal from Pennsylvania. The last thing they put out was in 2017. It's called The Lesser God, and this is my plea for them to release more music because it's so good, and everyone should listen to it and ask them to make more music because it's so good. It's kind of a weird one and a recent one, but there's this YouTube channel called GeoWizard, and up until this point, all they've done is like walkthroughs of that internet game, GeoGuessr. But out of nowhere, he just put up this video series of him trying to walk across all of Wales in a straight line. And it's just him like crashing through like farmers' backyards and like swimming through lakes because they happen to be in the way of the straight line. And he's just like woefully underprepared for the whole experience. And it's a hoot and hollers. Check it out.
Actually sounds really good.
It's so funny.
This week I watched a movie called Stoker. Came out in 2013. It's the English language debut of Park Chan-wook, the South Korean director who you may know for making the film Old Boy. It's pretty good. It's nice. It's kind of a Hitchcock pastiche with some little spooky, maybe melodramatic elements. It's got Nicole Kidman in it, who I always love. And if you're looking for a nice, if a little predictable thriller, this is for you. I would also recommend, if you are into the religious elements of Caligula, but maybe want something a little bit more akin to worship music, you should check out the Revolutionary Army of the Infant Jesus' album, Beauty Will Save the World. Least Googleable band name of all time. But Really amazing, ritualistic, kind of ambient, droney, really lovely vocal choral music that is decidedly Christian in nature. And I think it's really phenomenal and really lovely, and I listen to it all the fucking time. Finally, if you haven't heard father of Jeff Buckley, Tim Buckley's solo work, you're a fool and a madman, and you need to put on Star Sailor right the fuck away. We all know that This Mortal Coil is good. We all know that we like It'll End in Tears, but the original version of Song to the Siren is the most fucking devastating thing that you'll ever hear in your entire life. It's gorgeous, jazzy, weird, arrhythmic textures with wailing vocals. Tim Buckley was a lot more talented, but equally dead as his son, Jeff. I think of his 5 or so studio albums that he's put out, you will not find a dud among any of them. But Star Sailor is really the one to check out. Give it a listen if you haven't. Thanks so much for watching this week, and we'll see you on the open road.